A narcissist doesn't fear you because you hurt them. They fear you because you're no longer under their control. They're not angry because you walked away. They're angry because you didn't look back, didn't apologize, and didn't need them to define who you are. And in their world, that is a devastating blow. Narcissists don't function like normal people. They don't build their sense of self from within. They build it from how others react to them. Every compliment, every admiration, every tear you once shed over them, all served as proof of their power. So when you go silent, stop reacting, stop begging, and stop hating, you become something they can't control. And that's when they begin to fall apart. You think they're fine, that they've moved on, that they're happy with someone new. But that's just a mask built out of desperation. Because when a narcissist loses their source of reflection, which was you, they don't just lose a relationship, they lose the distorted sense of self they've clung to their entire life. You were the one who gave them a chance to change. You forgave. You stayed. You tried to fix something you didn't even break. But eventually you realized, the longer you stayed, the more you disappeared. The more you gave, the more they took. And in the end, you did the one thing they never expected. You left. Silently, without needing a grand finale. That moment sent them into panic. Because for a narcissist, the thing they fear most isn't the end, it's the loss of control. And you, the one they believed would always come back, became the first person to confront them with a brutal truth. They no longer had any power over you. They'll never say it. They'll never admit that you were different. But the truth is, they can't forget you. Not because of love, but because you were the only one who truly mirrored who they are, including the parts they tried to bury. And now, with you gone, that reflection has vanished too. They've become invisible even to themselves. In this video, we're diving deep into the psychological layers a narcissist experiences after you walk away. Not to make you feel smug, but to help you understand you were never weak. Your leaving was not a failure. It was a powerful act, a wake-up call, and the beginning of the collapse of a manipulative system that's gone on far too long. If you've ever wondered, do they think about me? Do they suffer? Or why does my silence make them so angry? The answers are right here, and you deserve to know them. Stick with us until the end of this video, because the truth won't just help you heal, it'll help you stay strong on the path you so bravely chose, the path of freedom, of authentic identity, and of no longer needing anyone else to define your worth. A narcissist doesn't hate you because you once loved them. They don't even hate you for walking away. What truly enrages them is that you saw through them and had the courage to turn your back without needing a reason, without needing to justify it. That self-possession shattered something deep within them, the part that always believed they could manipulate and control other people's emotions at will. To a narcissist, love isn't about connection. It's a tool for power. As long as you stayed, they still had a role to play. They could hurt you, then rescue you, just to reaffirm their dominance. But when you walked away in silence, without demanding an apology, without needing closure, without playing into the script, it wasn't just a breakup. It was a reversal of power. And in the narcissist psychological framework, that is unforgivable. The hatred they carry toward you isn't rooted in heartbreak. It's a knee-jerk response to ego injury. They hate you because you dared to say no to control, because you stopped being their mirror, no longer reflecting back the image they had carefully constructed, and most infuriating of all, you no longer needed them. Something they've never had the courage to admit about anyone. They might try to tell the world that you're the problem, that you're weak, immature, or overly sensitive, but that's just ego defense. They need to rewrite the story, not for you, but for themselves, to avoid confronting the brutal truth that they lost someone who once loved them deeply, but who could no longer be used. Remember this: narcissists don't grieve like normal people. They don't sit with the loss and reflect on the relationship. They experience the rage of a wounded ego. A piece of their self-bit has been ripped apart, and the one who caused it is none other than you. The one who once complied so easily, now seen as a threat to the distorted belief system they live by. That's why, even after you leave, they keep watching you. They act indifferent on the surface, but behind the scenes, they try to control the narrative, retelling their version of events to make you look like the villain. But none of this behavior comes from strength. It comes from fear. Fear of being exposed. Because if others start seeing them the way you did, the mask stops working, and it's in that moment that their hatred for you becomes a mirror reflecting their deepest insecurity, that they're not nearly as invincible as they believed. You did something they were never prepared for. You took your power back. You refused to keep playing the emotional games they created. And you didn't fall apart. On the contrary, you grew stronger, more peaceful and braver than ever before. Their hatred isn't proof that you were wrong. It's confirmation that you were right. And you've become the one thing they fear, envy, and can never control again. A narcissist doesn't exist as solidly as they want others to believe. They don't have a stable sense of self built from inner growth or genuine self-worth. Instead, they survive through reflection. They need people around them to mirror back the image they're trying to project. They need someone to confirm that they're important, desirable, superior. And when that someone is you, someone who once offered them sincere attention, emotionally engaged presence, and authentic care, you became the central mirror in their life. Not because they loved you in a genuine way, but because you were the most sophisticated tool they had to feel like they existed. But when you walked away, in silent, resolute detachment with no explanations and no looking back, you didn't just leave them. You took the most precious mirror they ever had. And for a narcissist, that's worse than a breakup, because what they truly fear isn't the loss of love. It's the loss of the ability to sustain their self-image through your gaze. Without you there to admire, react, hurt, or rage, they're left in chaos. They're unanchored. They no longer know who they are. In the early days, they'll try to fill the void. Maybe they'll quickly latch onto someone new, not out of love, but out of a desperate need for a new emotional supply. They'll restart the same seductive cycle, rushing into romance, excessive flattery, presenting a flawless version of themselves, all in an effort to prove to themselves that they still have worth, that they're still wanted. But what they didn't anticipate is that you're not so easily replaced. The new person might be more compliant, less resistant, or even easier to please, but no one can reflect them as deeply as you once did. No one saw them as clearly or hurt as deeply because of them. No one was wise enough to recognize their game and still stayed the way you once did. The replacement becomes a shallow shadow, and over time, they begin to compare, even if only silently. They remember your eyes. They remember your silence when you saw through their lies. They remember how you looked past the glittering mask and touched the fragile human beneath, the part they've always tried to hide. And that unsettles them, because with every glance at this new person who doesn't reflect the image they crave, they realize the mirror is broken. All their efforts to piece together the old reflection fail, and that's when they spiral into internal chaos. Because a narcissist doesn't know how to define themselves without others' reactions. Without someone to reflect back their false sense of value, they begin to feel invisible. Your presence once proved to them that they were lovable, worthy of attention, but now you're gone, not just physically, but emotionally. You don't reply to their messages, you don't post heartbroken statuses, you don't say anything. You do nothing. And that silence is not emptiness, it's a declaration. And it forces the narcissist to confront their greatest fear, a world where they are no longer the center. At this point, they may spiral into compulsive behavior, checking your social media, asking mutual friends about you, sending vague signals your way, but they're not really looking for you. They're chasing the feeling of existing, the feeling your attention once gave them, because without you, they're like a blurred image, unacknowledged, unreflected. They can't feel real unless someone is looking at them and saying they matter. And that's when the collapse begins, from the inside. a type of ego crisis they don't even know how to name, because they've never learned how to exist without someone else as their mirror. Without you, they're forced to face themselves. But there's nothing there to see, just a void, dark, cold, and impossible to fill with anyone else. When the narcissist no longer has anyone to manipulate, it's also when the powerful mask they've worn for so long begins to crack from within. Contrary to the cool, composed image they strive to present to the world, the truth is they are slowly sinking into a silent collapse, a swirling inner turmoil that no one hears or sees, yet that devours them piece by piece. This phase isn't like the angry outbursts, the demands, or the manipulations of the past. It's a moment when every tool of control becomes ineffective. There are no more victims to blame. There's no one left to pull the emotional strings. All of their tactics, from silent treatment, sulking, crying, and self-deprecation to playing the victim, lose their power because you have come to a complete stop. You no longer watch. You no longer react. You no longer play a role in their drama. And at that very moment, the harsh reality silently crashes into their minds. They no longer control anyone, not even themselves. The narcissist's psyche was never built on genuine self-awareness. They never learned to regulate their emotions or face the emptiness within using mature emotional growth like ordinary people do. With no one left to shine a light on them, their stage goes dark. They still smile, still go to work, still post cheerful photos, yet their eyes begin to droop and their faces seem as if they're desperately trying to hold on to something slipping away. They will start to behave strangely. They might fall completely silent, or they might suddenly become overwhelmingly loud. Both extremes are signs of losing their direction. They no longer know which role to play: the victor, the abandoned one, the indifferent one, or perhaps the reborn self. Whatever role they choose, they fail because there is no longer anyone to reflect their emotions. You have withdrawn from the stage, and the only audience left is them, confronted with a terrifying void far greater than anything else, their own true selves. This condition leads to a kind of dangerous, silent depression. No one sees them falling apart because a narcissist never reveals their vulnerability, yet in their solitary moments they struggle with a vague feeling, who am I when there's no one left for me to manipulate? And that question remains unanswered for a lifetime spent never truly building a self. There's no one left to text for control, no one to threaten with abandonment in order to evoke sympathy, no one left to verbally attack, then fumble apologies just to maintain the connection, and so they drift, purposeless and ungrounded. Every artificial reaction in the past was merely a way to reaffirm that they still have power. Now there is no one left to react. All efforts to manipulate are like reaching out into thin air, touching nothing. This pain isn't like the sorrow of someone who's lost a lover. It's the anguish of a collapsing control system, of a fabricated self, disintegrating layer by layer. They don't grieve for you as a real person. They mourn only the reflection you once provided. They don't suffer because they lost a love, but because there's no one left to validate that they matter. It is in your prolonged silence that they realize one thing: they never truly had you. They merely had your reactions. And now, when silence is no longer a tactic, but genuine release, they have no door to return through. There's no button left for them to press. Every door has been closed. And for the first time, they understand the game is over. And you were the one who left the stage before the lights went out. That moment marks the beginning of the real collapse. No commotion, no bloodshed, just a person sitting amid the ruins of every scheme that once gave them a sense of power. And now, those schemes hold no value, as no one is willing to take part any longer. After your silence becomes permanent, and after every manipulation tactic fails, the narcissist arrives at a crossroads they can no longer avoid. One path leads to rebuilding themselves on truth and inner confrontation. The other, far more common, is a return to the same toxic cycle, cloaked in a new disguise, increasingly hollow and weary. For most narcissists, Facing their raw, unmasked self is unbearable. They don't know how to sit with pain without blaming someone. They don't know how to name their true emotions because, from a young age, they learn to escape them through control and performance. So, they won't choose the painful path that leads to healing. They'll choose the easier one, reconstructing the mask, this time more sophisticated, more subtle, and more dangerous. Their method of rebuilding is to seek a new supply, a new person, a new target to admire them, to believe in them, to serve as a mirror reflecting their sense of existence. But here's a truth they know deep down. No one can replace you. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real. You were the one who saw them most clearly, even when they didn't want to be seen. And that feeling of being truly seen both terrified them and made them crave you. They'll use the same sweet words, give gifts, make promises, play the role of the kind, attentive partner. Everything you once experienced will be repeated, but with someone new, someone who hasn't yet seen behind the mask. But this time, everything moves faster, more rushed, less depth, because they no longer have the strength to sustain a long performance. They've lost faith, and they've lost patience. They're running from themselves. Over time, the narcissist's relationships become shorter, emptier, and more chaotic. The more they fail, the more desperate they become, and the more desperate they are, the harder they try to use others to fill a void they themselves don't understand. No matter who they're with, they can't truly connect because connection requires the presence of an authentic self, something they never took the time to develop. At this stage, the narcissist faces two possible directions. 1. To continue spinning through destructive cycles. 2. To confront the painful truth that their false self is no longer sustainable. A small few, very few, might choose the second path. When they hit rock bottom, when every relationship has crumbled, when they look in the mirror and see no reflection at all, a flicker of awakening might appear. That's when they begin to ask, what have I done? Who am I without all these masks? This is the beginning of a deep transformation, but it requires a humility that most narcissists don't possess or were never taught to cultivate. The rest will choose to keep wearing the mask. They may become the successful one, the mindful one, the enlightened one, the healer, but these are just more polished versions of the same thing, avoiding the truth. In these cases, they become a shadow of themselves, still smiling, still talking, still engaging in relationships, but without real emotion. They exist like a puppet with no soul inside, and tragically, with each repetition of the same script, they lose yet another chance at real healing. At this point, there's something you need to remember. If you ever tried to help them, if you ever hoped they would change, if you gave and gave until you finally had to let go, that was not your failure. It was their limitation. No one can be saved if they don't want to be saved. No one can see the light if they insist on staying in the dark just to cling to a shattered ego. And you, the one who dared to step out of the storm, are living proof that instead of clinging to illusion, a person can choose truth, and from there, be reborn. The deepest irony in a relationship with a narcissist is this: the more you heal, the more they unravel. The more you withdraw in peace, the more insecure they become. And the more authentically you live, the more exposed they are by the very falsehood they once hid so well. A narcissist doesn't fear losing you out of love. They fear losing you because you were the last person still reflecting back to them a sense of existence. When you begin to heal, when you stop mentioning them, stop posting vague emotional captions, stop silently checking in on them, that's when they feel it most clearly. You've truly stepped out of their sphere of influence. Healing isn't just about going silent. Healing is when you no longer need silence to appear strong, because you are strong naturally from within. It's when you no longer see them as a wound that needs healing, but as a lesson that has ended. That transformation flips their entire mental power structure upside down. They were used to a version of you who was emotionally dependent, waiting for validation. They believed that one message, one glance, one breadcrumb of attention would be enough to pull you back into the cycle. But now, you don't react. You don't seek closure. You no longer play the game. And that unsettles them more than any angry confrontation ever could. When you post a glowing photo not to prove anything, but because you truly feel at peace, the narcissist feels threatened. When you share a joyful moment, not a hint that you've moved on, but simply because you've stopped thinking about them, they begin to feel themselves disappear from the screen of your mind, and to them, that's worse than hatred. That's invisibility. Nothing wounds a narcissist more than no longer being mirrored. You didn't just leave physically, you left energetically. You stopped playing the role. You stopped fighting. You stopped needing them to define you. And with that, they lose their anchor. The very thing that made them feel like they had an identity. While you're learning to love yourself, setting new boundaries and building healthier relationships, they're battling a void they can't fill. They may still smile in public, still appear happy on social media, but beneath the surface lies envy, regret, and a crumbling sense of self. You're no longer their supply. Worse than that, you've become a living testament to growth, something they crave but cannot grasp. Every step you take forward, every display of self-ownership, reminds them that they're losing in a game they thought they'd always win. A narcissist will never accept the truth that you didn't leave because you were weak, but because you were strong. Not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally loved yourself more. And that's something they'll never fully comprehend. That real love doesn't come from control, but from inner freedom. When you heal, you no longer need to look back. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain. And it's that calm, not your anger, that becomes the death knell to the narcissist's illusion of power. Because you're no longer a character in their script. You've left the stage and chosen to live your truth instead. And to them, that is the most terrifying thing of all. A narcissist always believes they can control the storyline. They write the script, they direct the scenes, they create the conflict, and then they wait for an ending they can control. Usually one where you come back crying, apologizing, or at the very least tormented by guilt. But when you choose to walk away without leaving a final line, when you stop seeking closure from them and instead create it within yourself, the entire game collapses. You didn't just end a relationship, you ended a cycle. Your silence wasn't manipulation, it was liberation. You no longer needed anything from them, not an apology, not validation, not recognition for the pain you endured. And that is what true freedom looks like. This kind of freedom isn't loud, it doesn't need declarations, it doesn't require you to stand at the top of your life and shout, "I've moved on." It's found in the quiet, steady things, the way you sleep more peacefully, the way you speak to yourself with love, the way you feel lighter when a new day begins without being haunted by the chaos of someone who tried to define you through control. Narcissists will never understand this. To them, every ending must be dramatic, a victory, a revenge, or a desperate plea to return. But you did none of that. You simply stepped out of their power structure, with calm, with no theatrics, and without a single accusation. And that, more than anything, is what they can never get closure from. Because a narcissist doesn't crave truth. They crave emotional control. They want to be the one who ends the story, even if they were the one who caused the harm. When you walk away in silence and heal from within, you deny them the one thing they wanted most, confirmation that they still live in your mind. True freedom isn't about making others understand you, it's about understanding yourself. Not everyone is strong enough to live without needing an explanation. Not everyone is brave enough to let go without demanding justice. But if you're still here, still walking, still healing, still living in peace, then you've already done it. You don't need closure from someone who was never capable of honesty. You don't need them to admit they were wrong to feel that you were right. You don't need their collapse to feel like you've won. Your victory is in the peace you nurture every single day, the peace they will never reach. And if there's one last thing worth remembering, it's this. Real maturity is when you no longer need a beautiful ending for a terrible story. You just need yourself, with all the scars, the lessons, and the rebirth you've walked through. No explanation needed, no validation required, no audience necessary. You've written a new chapter without them, and that's something a narcissist will never be able to do. Live a life that's real without needing someone else to reflect it back.